Okay, so here we are in the private screening room slash theater of this house. And these, I'll be honest with you, I hate photographing these things. They have no redeeming qualities whatsoever, photographically speaking. Now, this is an incredible theater room, and I would love to have one in my house, but they frustrate the heck out of me, and I'm going to walk you through how I make them look good. So, what is so difficult about these is that they're literal black boxes designed to suck up any and all light. Now, we have our own LED lighting me, but other than that, the practical lighting in here is very, very subtle, and I like to say the human eye is a miracle and the camera is a machine. So the camera is having a very difficult time picking up all of the little nuance and dark fabrics in here. So give me a second to walk through how I composed this photo. I obviously need to show the screen, and I need to show that there are 3 rows of seating to show the size of this thing. I'm a little bit wider than I'd like to be, but this is more really an informational shot than some artistic masterpiece. I run into these all the time, and this is one of the more difficult ones, and in most cases I'm shooting at 17. So that being said, here's my first composition. You can see a little sliver of this 3rd row, the 2nd row, and the 1st row, and you see some of this really cool track lighting lighting up in between every couch. But obviously you can see that it's just way too dark where the light isn't shining down. You've got these little lights in the ceiling illuminating the pathways, but other than that, everything is a black hole. I could drag my shutter out for like 30 seconds and try to fill this room with light, but it's gonna look really muddy. And rather than sort of let these tiny lights dominate the scene, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna light paint with my my ProPhoto B10 here. I'm gonna match my color temperature using that light to the color of the ambient light in this room, and I'm gonna try to make something a bit sexier, a bit more interesting that shows everything we need to know in a much better way. Now, there is a screen on over here, and we're probably going to end up replacing that in post-production. I'm not too worried about it right now because any light we're going to add is going to overpower that screen. So I don't want to turn all of the existing practical lighting off. I do want people to know that there are lights in this room, and I want them to know where those lights are located. But they just don't add enough light to the scene to let the viewer know what's going on. So we're going to enhance that lighting a little bit by adding some light of our own. One other reason I've chosen this composition off to the side is that if I were to do a 1-point perspective, I would lose the track lighting, which is really cool. There are these LED strips on each step, backlighting the couches. And if I put the camera behind the couch, I would see it in the first one, but not the second one. Also, I like to have some separation between these giant black couches, and the sort of silvery carpet lets the viewer know that there's more than just 1 or 2 rows of seating. All right, so I'm ready to start shooting, and the first thing I'm going to do, of course, is focus the camera and make sure my composition is totally dialed in. We're looking pretty good. So what I want to do is I want to slightly underexpose the practical lights in this room. I'm going to make them pretty dark. I don't want them to be overpoweringly bright. So here's my first exposure, and as you can see, I'm making sure to keep those lights really low. So I've got my exposures for the practical lighting, and now I'm going to add my own light with my B10 via a little bit of light painting. All right, so there is a nice sort of warm light coming down from these practical interior lights. I'm going to dial the B10 in to match those. All right, that's really cool. Not the good cool, but cold cool. And we're going to warm that up until it looks like it's matching. I'm just eyeballing this here. Like, that's way too warm. But I think right in there is right about where I want to be. So let's give this a shot and see how it looks. All right, so we're going to turn off the video light that's lighting me, and I'm going to get the shot. So here I am with my B10, and you can see how when I walk with it, it lights up the back of this furniture, right? So that's how I'm going to light paint everything. And when I turn that off or point it away, it just becomes a complete and total black hole. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend I am the screen. I'm going to pretend all the light is coming from this way, because if we're watching at a movie theater, where is the light coming from? It's coming from the screen and it's reflecting back into the audience. So I want to make this believable. So all of my light is going to be pointing this way. So I'm going to go ahead and start this, and I'm only at 1 second f11 because, again, I want to tame these overhead lights, and you can see how bright they are on my iPad screen. I want to bring everything up to that level. So I'm going to make it a little easier on myself. I'm going to go to 2 seconds, and I'm going to go to ISO 100 so I can get a little more time to cover every spot. And there is that light on the back of the couch there. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And I'll come up to the next row and repeat the process. Again, nice big strokes. All right, so as I do this, I can kind of talk about some common mistakes people make. And that would be not picking a light source and lighting in every direction possible. I'm being very deliberate with what direction the light is coming from. I want to make sure I'm definitely not pointing the light in the same direction as the camera. There we go. I really like that. If I stand at the camera and I light paint this way, look how flat that is, right? It looks like it's like an on-camera flash or something. But if I light from above, as if it's coming above in the front, as if it's coming from the screen, you get a much nicer quality of light. Look at that. That thing is just dripping soft light. That looks amazing, right? All right, I'll get in here. Again, only from forward and above back towards the camera. So I'm going to get the edges of these chairs here just to kind of let the viewer know exactly where they are. And we're going to go ahead and turn this off, put the light down. And the last thing I'm going to do is bracket a full range of exposures from, we're going to start at 1 second f11 ISO 200, and I'm going to go 5 shots, but I'm only going to go up because I know that nothing here is blown out, and I'm only going to want things that are brighter. So I'm going to go 2 seconds, and then I'm going to go 4 seconds. And as you can see, at 4 seconds, things are starting to blow out a little bit. And then 8 seconds. And at 8 seconds, you start to get that really nice sort of glow on the back of the couches. But when that glow shows up, the floor starts to blow out. And then I'll do one at 15 seconds. And you can begin to see, look at all that flare showing up, right? When the shutter speed gets longer, you can see all that flare sneaking into the frame. And I'm going to do one shot where I block that. I'm just going to use my iPad as a flag. And I'm going to put that over the lens to stop the flare from affecting the photo. So as I hold the iPad over the lens, that is going to remove the flare from the light above skimming across the front element. And there's a massive improvement in the reduction of the flare. So we can use that as our ceiling. And at this length of shutter speed, I really like how you start to get the almost hazy downlighting aspect. It looks like we're in like a real theater or something. All right, so I think we've got everything we need. Like I said, these are not my favorite spots to shoot, and it's going to require a lot of post, so let's see what we can do. All right, guys, so here we are in post on our last photo. This is a tricky one. It's a really tough space, not only to photograph, but to put together. So let's go ahead and get started. What I'm going to be doing is looking for bits and pieces of everything that I like, right? I've got our light painted frames here, and I love what they do to the chairs, but also notice that when I start to really play with the shadows and highlights, I adore these sort of beams of light coming down from the ceiling. So I'm going to seek to blend this with our light painted images and create something really cool, and hopefully something that has a lot of mood, that looks like a really fun place to be, not just a snapshot, a Xerox with the flash of a theater. So let's put this together piece by piece. I know I'm going to have to pull these shadows up really high. I'm only really looking at the upper half of this image because I know the lower half is going to be a blend. And I think that will probably do it there. And I'm going to do, again, pull some highlights down on this. But I'll be honest and say that I like the way the floor looks in these darker exposures, so I feel like it's going to be a really subtle blend on the bottom and then a bit more pronounced up top to get that sort of those beams of light coming down. It almost looks like alien abduction or something. And then we've got these light painted frames, and I don't think those need too much adjustment here in Lightroom. I'm just going to bring the shadows up a little bit. Like I said, I do want to keep this relatively dark and sexy. I hate to use that word, but I can't think of a better way to describe it. Cool? Just doesn't really cut it. So let's take we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 light painted frames. Yep. And we're going to take the brightest exposure here for the ceiling, upper half of the image. And we'll take 2 of the darker ones and we'll go put this together and see what we get. Okay, so we've got our images in Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and get the light painted images out of the way and get to work on our blend. So here's our brightest, mid, and darkest exposures. And like I said, I just want to sort of bring in a little bit of detail in the bottom. So how do I want to approach this? I'm going to try to keep this really simple. I'm going to add a layer mask. I'm going to select a gradient tool here. And I'm just going to go like this. Right? That looks pretty good. I mean, maybe I could do a little bit of a more accurate blend here. But honestly, I don't need to go crazy just because of the way this image is sort of set up. It's just a top and lower half thing, right? We keep all of those cool lights in the ceiling and they're sort of casts coming downward. There's some kind of, I don't know if this is someone who we were filming with or some kind of lens flare, but I'm just going to blend it out. That's looking good. All right, so there's our blend there. And now we have this darkest frame. I'm going to add a black layer mask. And it's really these like pools of light. And I'm just going to paint this in. To get some of that detail back. I almost wonder if I should bring more brightness into these couches. But we'll see what the light painting does. All right, onward. So let's add our light painting. I'm going to go one piece at a time. Alt-click, black layer mask, take a brush. Blend mode, lighten. Start painting in. Same thing here. There we go. Blend mode. Lighten. Moving right along. Alt click, blend mode, lighten, take a brush, make it soft, paint it in, piece of cake. Make sure I don't get myself. Okay, next. Alt click, brush, blend mode, lighten. Paint in some of that cool light. And lastly, the one in front of us. And turn that on and off. And I am noticing like a little bit of a magenta cast in our light painted frames. So I'm going to add a curves adjustment. I'm going to clip it to this group so that whatever I do only affects the group. So like I said, there's a bit of magenta in there. So I'm just going to pull out some red here. And you can see that sort of blends. It's just like the tiniest bit. And I'll just clean up my light painting. Get it off the back of those couches. I just want it on the top. Yeah. So it's really subtle. It really just serves to add some definition to the top of those couches, so it's easy to tell how big this room is and see where the couches begin and end. And then let's see, take a little zoomed out view here. That looks pretty good. All right, so let's deal with the screen. I mean, I don't know what you guys think about the screen. I love the glow that it's casting on the room, but I don't love that it's this obvious Roku background. So I'm just gonna mess this up a little bit. I'm gonna make a new group. I'm gonna call it screen. I'm gonna add a layer mask to that so that whatever I do stays within there. I'm going to copy that screen and paste it in my group so that I've got one I can play with here. And I'm gonna blur this and I'm gonna change the colors a bit. No, I'm gonna leave the colors, but I'm gonna blur it so it's a little more abstract. So I'll just go filter, blur, let's try motion blur. Sort of very subtly match the angle here. And like, how far can I blur this? All right, that's, I do like how it's almost just like abstract painting now rather than a obvious Roku screen, but the colors are a little funky. So I'm just gonna change the hue of this thing ever so slightly. So it's more sunset-y, less Roku-y. That probably is believable. And if you want to go one step further, probably also add like a projector beam. So that's pretty simple. I'll show you how to do that. You got to pretend your projector is up here somewhere. So you got a projector in this corner. You can take a lasso and just sort of trace out the edges of the screen. You can add a, let's say, a 2015 pixel feather, and then fill it with white. I know this looks ridiculous. I know that looks ridiculous. You want like the subtlest little beam of projection. We can add a mask. And we can sort of clean this up a bit. So that's a little more focused. There you go. And I like that because it plays nice with the other beams of light in the room. But I'm going to go ahead and say that's done. Really subtle. I don't know, maybe 5%. You can play with this. Ooh, you know what might be the ticket? Is if it fades as it gets closer to the TV. Is that what it's called? Projector? TV. The TV. I'm just going to fade it out. Like that. That looks pretty cool. and there we have it. I'm going to do a quick clone down here on these wires, and I'm going to save this back to Lightroom and finish it off there. Okay, here we are back in Lightroom. Let's go ahead and add a little contrast, a little texture, a little clarity. And I think that's all we need. A crop would be nice here, and we'll make sure that we can go nice and vertical. Get everything lined up as well as we can. Do a quick guided transform here. We don't have too much to go on. Everything is so dark, so I hope I can get this somewhat accurate. That looks pretty good. And I do want to crop out, I feel like some of these lights may be a little distracting. Maybe 16:9 is the ratio that we need to get the width. But not, I love it, that looks great. There is our final shot, looking really good. After a big set like this, I'll probably sit on it for a day or two and go back with fresh eyes and make sure that all of my color and lighting and sort of global processing matches so that there's a consistent, consistent white balance, a consistent contrast between all the images, because I want everything to be cohesive. So I'll sit on these for a few days, come back and do any finishing touches, and if anything looks glaringly out of place, I'll do a quick edit then to make sure that it's in line with the rest of them. But other than that, that's exactly how I'd edit a huge house like this. A pretty common architectural job for me, really. And that's the ins and outs of it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching all this post-production, and if nothing else, you learned a few new tricks. There's so much you can do with Photoshop. It's absolutely scary, even if you have to drop an iPhone photo into your 50 megapixel 5 DSR shot. So enjoy, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, so it's actually been a few days, and I'm gonna go back and look at the edits that we just made. I wanna do this with a clear head. I hate being rushed to deliver photographs because what ends up happening, it even happened with my book, I will work long hours late into the night to get the edits done, and then because I was hot and tired or rushing and it's just sort of out of it, I will wake up the next day, and I know it's happened to you too. You've looked at your photos and you said, oh my God, how could I miss that? Like in my book, there's sensor dust that I missed, there's people in the frame that I forgot to take out, there's all kinds of little mistakes here and there because we were under a deadline and I was really rushing to get that thing out the door as soon as possible. I try to make sure that I have time to do that for all of my clients because it is very important to me to deliver the best possible product, not only for them, but for my portfolio as well. So I hate it when I'm rushed to deliver photos, either because I suck at planning or because my clients need photos really fast. In a perfect world, we'd always have weeks and weeks and weeks to deliver images. But when I get the chance, like I have right now, I want to line up all my shots and go back and sort of just go over them with one last final gentle hand, so to say, and make sure that everything looks good. The color temperature is consistent, the exposures are consistent, the contrast and color, and I'm not missing anything like sensor dust. I want everything to be nice and consistent and that there's nothing that I didn't, take care of in post on the first pass through. So hope that makes sense. I'm just gonna go here. We got 11 shots and I'm gonna take a quick look over all these, and I already see things that that are sort of bothering me as I look at the set as a whole. There's a few ways to do this. I can hit the G key and make a grid of the photos and sort of look at them next to each other. And you can use the plus and minus keys to make that grid larger or smaller. But this helps to just sort of get an overall feel for the color palette and brightness and sort of thing that those sort of things that you're looking at. So, all right, here we go. We have this shot on the left, and compared to the other two, that is a lot brighter. And the thing that I'm noticing is I'd almost rather make these two here a little bit brighter to match. Maybe this can come like a little darker. I'm not gonna be doing really any edits in, here's a piece of sensor dust that I missed. So I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in and get that. Not really gonna be doing any edits in Photoshop. Like I said, these are just sort of light touches that make things look better overall. Here's a little It's a knot in the wood, but I find that to be pretty distracting, so I'm going to take that out. Here's a little fire alarm that I missed. And that looks pretty good on the whole. Like I said, I feel like this one seems almost too dark. So I'm going to see if I can just ease up a little bit. And I hate, this is the knot in the wood, not sensor dust. Not. But I find it distracting, so I'm going to pull it out. Or just do something to kind of lighten it up. And there's a few of these things down here that I didn't really see while I was editing that now I come back and they jump right out at me, so. And now that feels a bit better. The shadows down here are more consistent with the shadows here. And the same for this. I like the mood of this, but it doesn't really fit with the rest of the shots in the series. So I'm just gonna sort of lighten up some of the vignette on this. I don't think it needs to be so pronounced. I think I can just get rid of it and get the same effect. And this shot, here's the bathroom shot. Even though this is dark, I still really like it. The brights sort of match that of the other exposures. If anything, I feel like it could be bumped up on the whole a smidge. And because the whole point of this shot was to teach you that darker editing style, I'm gonna leave it alone. But I don't find it to be distractingly dark or unbelievably dark, because the highlights, again, the highlights look great in all three photos. They're all equal brightness, so I think we can get away with it. This shot feels really good. Color temperature wise, again, things are starting to get a little bit later in the day, so things are warming up a bit, so they gradually get a little warmer as we go through. And then we have this shot here, which is even a little touch warmer than the last one. And this one looks pretty nice. I'm gonna pull out this light switch there, and then there's this guy here. And let's see, I probably can get a better spot to pick here. And any sensor dust or anything that's bugging me. No, that looks pretty good. Moving on to the bedroom. It still looks, I can't believe there's an iPhone. That's crazy. It looks really good. It is a lot warmer. Maybe it's a little warm. We can back that off like a kiss. Really subtle adjustment to cool it down a little bit and kind of keep it in line, because this is very, very warm. But I think on the whole it looks great. I wonder if it's too saturated out the window. So maybe I can just chill out some of those blues using the HSL panel here in Lightroom. Again, very subtle. You can really crank it, but I don't think we need to. I think just a little reduction in those blues would push this a little more towards golden hour and a bit more believability. Then we have these interior shots. It sucks how freaking hazy it was out there, but it still looks really good. I still see some of that wood knot problem. My eye immediately picks up on these. So I'm just gonna see if I can tame those a little bit. That looks better. This does feel a little flat contrast-wise, so I'm going to see if I can just do a little movement with the blacks, with the shadows. I'm going to pull the shadows down, pull the blacks down. And I'm going to add, maybe it needs a little like clarity or something. I don't want to overdo it because the interior is fine. Colleen looks good. She's wearing black, so she's gonna be somewhat dark. That's fine with me. It is twilight. So yeah, very subtle edit there, just to kind of, but I don't think sort of completely replacing this view. We gotta live with that smoky exterior. And same on this one. However, that looks a little rough. Let's see if I can, I might have to take this into Photoshop and clean it up a little bit. Yeah, just pull some of that saturation down, and I feel like it's a little too dark. So I'll brighten it up just a bit. Yeah, that looks better. It looks like they match now. I'm keeping an eye on the floor down here to make sure that those are the same brightness values. But I think that looks pretty good. This looks a little uncanny valley, but not bad. Not too bad. This still feels a little purple. Like there's a little bit of red in it or something. So I think what's going to have to happen is I'm going to pull out. It's like that magenta. Yeah, it's that magenta right there. And by pulling that out, it makes a big difference. But that does look really good. Can you see that magenta that I'm pulling out on the sort of the nearest edge of the home right up here on these guys? It looks like there's a, I don't know if that was I did a lazy job masking this or something else. So I'm just going to jump into Photoshop. There's like a little electric blue line on the roof line. I'm going to go ahead and take that out. And I really hate this this power pole up here. So let's jump into Photoshop and quickly fix those. And what's great is that I can, again, just open that file right back up here in Photoshop and get down to work. All right, here we are in Photoshop for one last dance here. Let's see if I can figure out what exactly is causing. Okay, it's something in this group. There is a mask here. I'm just going to go through one by one. Or is it? It's all of these. So it's just this whole thing right here. I'm going to add a mask to that group and see if I can just easily take a brush and take that out. So set the foreground color to black, 100% opacity. And what's that doing? There's still something that I don't love here. Is it this? Yeah, it looks like this gradient is sort of poking through. That seems to be the biggest offender here. So I'm just going to take that out. And it looks a lot less electric blue as soon as I start painting out that gradient. And I think because I am dumb, I sort of built the same mask over and over. So I'm going to go in and clean up this electric blue manually. If I had been paying more attention while narrating, I probably could have done a better job, but I'm just going to clone it out. And I'm just going to use a small medium hardness brush. And I'm just going to click and hold Shift and sort of trace that edge to clean that up pretty much perfectly here. And I'll go ahead and do that around the whole roof line. All right, and so that has been fixed. And lastly, I wanted to take out this little electric line up here. So let's go ahead and draw a lasso around that. I don't really mind that building, but you know what? I'm going to take out all of this. I can't stand any of it. It's just so ugly. So let's go ahead and draw a boundary here so that our cloning stays within that area. And I'm just going to probably end up taking this foliage and sort of planting it all along this line. So let's go ahead and make a new layer. We'll just make a group. and clone this thing out. So first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the pole. All right, now I'm going to copy all of this foliage here and see how I can sort of fake this into looking good. So there's plenty of things I can do. I'm going to flip my copy down here and sort of angle it a little bit, and then make a mask around the house. And apply that, and then let's see, I think I can blend this in. There's still some house there, so I'm going to paste it again. And I'll go like that. Just sort of try to make a more believable tree line here. Add a mask, take a brush, and sort of paint out do that one more time over here. Add the mask. Clean it up a little bit. Get in there. You can see like in here it looks really cloney, so I'm gonna go in with the black brush and soften that edge right there. And the same thing over here. All right, that's looking pretty good. There's some brushwork up top that looks a little rough, so I'll go in with the clone tool and clean that up a bit more accurately. And I'll probably just take some of these treetops here and work those in to get a nice clean edge. And there we go. That looks pretty good. I don't see too much cloniness. There's a little up here that could be improved subtly. So I'll go ahead and do that. Just sort of looking for anything that looks duplicated. And I'll quickly take it out. But on the whole, I think that looks pretty good. There's this little floppy thing here. That looks kind of rough, so I'll go ahead and remove that. Like such. And in a perfect world, I would catch this before I did the sky replacement so that I could use the sky to sort of cover the tracks, but that looks pretty good. I don't think anyone is going to see that and be like, oh, what have you done? So I'm gonna go ahead and save that back to Lightroom. And it should, Lightroom should apply all of our previous adjustments to the image. Okay, so here we are back in Lightroom with our saved image, and as you can see, Lightroom has applied all of the same edits. And there is what it did. It got rid of that sensor dust, just cleaned up the colors, removed that magenta, and there's our final shot. I think this looks absolutely awesome. Lastly is our theater here, and just as I suspected, there's a few pieces of sensor dust that I missed in post-production that I want to clean up, and there's a couple things like this sprinkler cover that need to go. And that, I think, is it. That looks pretty good. So there's our final 11 images. I think we've got an amazing set here, and I'm glad we took the extra time a couple days later to go back, because there's definitely a lot of things that I missed while I was doing post-production. It's something I try to do on every project. Most of the time I can. Rarely, I don't have the luxury, but it's a very important part of your post-production because your eyes do tend to get a little bit glazed over and you miss a lot of stuff, especially if you're editing late at night and the project has been going on for weeks. So now that we've finished all our post-production, I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial and learned plenty of things that you can apply to your own architectural photography. Thanks so much for watching.